Ladies and gentlemen, in this Diablo 4 video, we're going to take an in-depth look at the good old Pulverize Druid. This build is going to be one of the best when it comes to leveling, and at endgame, we're able to blast through high-end pit runs well over tier 70, and this guide will give you everything you need to know to create your successful Pulverize Druid. Let's go. So the first thing you want to be on the lookout for to make this build work is the shockwave aspect. This is going to deal damage in a large cone in front of you, and to get the most out of this ability, keep in mind there's a sweet spot between when you use Pulverize and the shockwave itself. So you essentially hit the enemy twice with one cast of that ability. And you're definitely going to want to put this aspect on your amulet while you're leveling for that 50% increase of power. Another choice that you're going to be presented with is either taking a defensive skill like Earthen Bulwark while leveling, but you can also take the other route and go with Petrify, which is a cooldown that provides a huge damage increase, and both of these are fantastic options and are going to serve their purpose perfectly depending on the content you're going up against. We also want to keep in mind in the early game we are very much starved of our resources, so using something like the Umbral aspect will be vital, especially as we're leveling. Find ways to get either resource generation or resource cost reduction, as that's going to increase your DPS output and make the flow of this build and playstyle a lot more fun and fast paced. And with our playstyle in mind, we want to do the best in making a nice tight group of enemies, since we're only able to hit one location at a time, and obviously what's in front of us. So trying to group the enemies up as best as we can before unleashing our cooldowns and pulverizability is going to be key. So for our talent points, we're going to start off with 1 point in Wind Shear, grab Advanced Wind Shear, and Fierce Wind Shear. This one skill already is going to do a couple key things for us. First, we get a nice movement speed buff from this, perfect while leveling. Second, we now have a way to apply Vulnerable to our enemies, and having a nice ranged option on a melee build to help us generate resources will only help us further. This one skill is also synergizing very well with the Wild Heart Hunger boots that increases your damage the more you shift in and out of your forms. That, alongside the aspect of natural balance, will all be affected by this one skill alone, and we'll dive into these aspects a bit deeper here in a second. We then go and max out 5 out of 5 in Pulverize, and we're going to want to try to get some additional points into this from our gear if possible. Then pick up Enhanced Pulverize to give us that guaranteed overpower, and Primal Pulverize for a bit of that damage reduction. We then want 1 point in Heart of the Wild just to access Wild Impulse to give us the biggest bang for our buck when using Pulverize, and we also grab 1 in Predatory Instincts, as well as 3 out of 3 in Iron Fur. Now, Iron Fur, you can obviously choose to put these points elsewhere, but a passive DR is something I personally would take every time. Moving on down the tree, we're taking Blood Howl, Enhanced Blood Howl, and Innate Blood Howl. This ability is perfect for us as it just gives us another way to jump in and out of forms frequently for a damage increase, as well as giving us a nice oh shit button with an on-demand heal, and is our first step in fixing our resource issue as it generates 20 spirit. We're then going to grab 1 out of 3 in Ancestral Fortitude, mainly to get the Vigilance node. Then we want to go and take 1 point into Poison Creeper, grab the enhanced version, and the Ferocious Poison Creeper. We're then going to be taking 1 point in Trample, Enhanced Trample, and Savage Trample. This again will give us another way to generate spirit, so we could swap between Howl and Charge to get the boost of spirit when needed. We also want to put 1 in Mending to get 3 out of 3 in Provocation, grab yourself 1 point in Crushing Earth to put 3 out of 3 in Stone Guard, and 1 out of 3 in Safeguard. Now, this would be a good place to swap those extra points in if you decided not to go with Iron Fur. And last up for this next cluster, we want to be taking 1 in Neurotoxin to stack as much as we can in Envenom to get that crit chance against poison enemies. For our ultimate skill, we would go with Petrify, as it's another huge boost in damage and gives us another chunk of resources that we really do need. This is going to stun all the enemies around you and increase the damage you do by 30%, and this stacks into all the other damage buckets that we're tapping into. Put 1 out of 3 in Defiance and 3 out of 3 in Circle of Life. In the same cluster, we then want to take 3 out of 3 in Quick Shift, again giving us a DPS bonus for shapeshifting, and 3 out of 3 in Heightened Senses. And our key passive is Earthen Strength for another nice DPS increase that we really don't have to think about. And do me a big favor, if you're enjoying this video, consider hitting that like button for me. It helps me out a lot. Thank you so much, guys. Now, some of the boons really synergize well for us, but a few of them out there are definitely optional. First off is the Deer Spirit. You really can't go wrong with the 15% damage reduction from elites with wariness. For the Eagle, we bond with this boon to get 2 of the nodes he has to offer. First, I go with Avian Wrath for the 30% increased critical strike damage, and Iron Feather to make us a bit more tanky. Now, if you're feeling comfortable with your survivability, you can always swap this out for Scythe Talons. Moving on to the Wolf Spirit, we take Pack Leader to reset the cooldown of our roots, which goes hand in hand with the the aspect we mentioned at the top. This restores our spirit when we CC an enemy, so this is consistently going to be generating resources for us that, again, we really do need. For our best in slot gear, stat priority, and aspects, starting with the defensive gear with the best stats being at the top, we're mainly going to be looking for max life, cooldown reduction, spirit per second, with all of these having the greater affix drops on them. Then we're going to be looking for willpower and dodge chance, and that's with me assuming you have both your element resistances and your armor capped. Our best defensive aspects, first off, is going to be might. It's a simple but strong 20% damage reduction. We also have disobedience and juggernaut as always, but something that really stands out and is something that you need to use is the exploiters aspect. This is going to be extending how long your roots or any CC lasts, but more importantly, it's going to give you a damage increase when you come across anything that can't be CC'd, and this goes for bosses as well. Talking about our offensive pieces, we're looking at, again, the best at the top, ranks to Envenom, ranks to Pulverize. We want spirit cost reduction, attack speed, movement speed with the greater affix on them. After that, look for your critical strike chance, overpowered damage, willpower, and max life. The offensive aspects that we should be on the lookout for, starting with our weapon, will be the shockwave aspect. For our neck piece, we want to prioritize the changeling's depth aspect, increasing our damage when hitting poison enemies, and for these next ones you can put wherever you want, but definitely get the Urzine horror aspect, making your pulverize or earth skill and generating some damage over time. Then we have the natural balance aspect, making it so when you cast a storm skill, your next earth skill will gain an increase in crit damage. And the aspect of raw might is something you may want to look into as well. Our best in slot pieces for us are going to be on the helm and the boots. The helm would be the Godslayer's crown. This is a huge quality of life upgrade for us because it's going to automatically pull all nearby enemies together in a nice death ball, as we discussed before. Plus, it adds a 60% DPS increase on top of it. Keep this piece on your radar. And the boots we're looking for are the Wild Heart Hunger boots. These have perfect stats for us and will incentivize us further to keep trying to shapeshift back and forth for a nice damage increase. Let's take a peek at the best route to take and glyphs to use in our Paragon board. Starting off, we want to be using the shapeshifter glyph. Since we're shapeshifting so much, this is going to give us yet another way to get more critical strike damage. Our first board we're going to be choosing is Inner Beast, with Dominate as the glyph socket. The third board on the list will be Ancestral Guidance, with Outmatch as our glyph of choice. This way we could start fixing that spirit or resource problem us druids tend to have. From there, we go to Earthen Devastation, with Werebear as our glyph, and that moves us right into the Survival Instinct board, with Exploit being the glyph we socket in here. And the last board we use is the Constricting Tendrils, with plugging in the glyph of Earth and Sky. There's a lot of great synergies here with this build, and the main gameplay to really keep in mind is our resource generation and cooldown management comes from Bloodhowl, Poison Creeper, Trample, and Petrify. Shapeshifting more often will increase our damage if taking the aspects and gear we spoke about here, and grouping enemies up while finding that sweet spot in Pulverize will certainly put your druid above the rest. The build planner is going to be in the description below, and I want to know what your main character is. What pit level did you make it to so far? And if you have any tips or advice to help people out, leave them in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. Toodles!